You may have been aware that recently two Puerto Rican people, a couple, were involved in a minor traffic accident on the streets of Chicago, pulled out of their cars by what appears to be a black gang, and executed in the streets. Giovanni Arzuga, 24, and Yasmin Perez were celebrating Puerto Rican Day when they drove through Humboldt Park, a neighborhood of Chicago, and with a Puerto Rican flag hanging from the car. According to local news, Arzuga was pronounced dead at the scene, while his girlfriend Perez was in critical condition, taken to hospital. This got the attention of everyone except from the left. Of course, you don't want to talk about this if you're a left-winger, because this doesn't involve white people. You can't point to the bad white person and say, see, it's your white supremacy that did this. It is only white supremacy in the very abstract that could be considered to be responsible for this.
Which they have done in the past.
Which they have done,
for example,
often.
The rise in anti-Asian hate crimes, as it's being labelled, and then a lot of the people doing it were black.
And, of course, the attacks on Jews in New York.
So it was labelled that whiteness and white supremacy was to blame for this, even though no white person was involved. Because it made the black person do this, presumably.
Yeah. But, I mean, we're getting more and more remote as other ethnic groups come into contact with Chicago.
I mean, that's the thing. It's like, well, if America gets less and less white, how are you going to continue to blame white people for everything?
That is a question that Richard Tate is going to have to answer at some point. So Richard Tate is a Democrat activist, the founder of the Democracy Preservation Initiative, DPIPAC. God, I hope this gets disbanded. He was excoriated by Twitter users after he attempted to justify the ambush of the couple who were dragged out of their vehicle by an African-American gang before being shot multiple times. He had used this organization to donate $444,436 to Joe Biden's presidential campaign. So he's not a nobody. He can command quite large sums of money. And when he heard about this on Twitter, he seems to have taken it wrong. But before we go on, he claims to be have turned Nebraska's 2nd District blue and propelled Joe Biden to winning the 2020 presidential election. He of course is a terribly wonderful guy. And so he replied to footage of the shooting on Twitter, and he appeared to mistake the Puerto Rican flag for a Confederate flag. Where he says, I'm sorry, is that a Confederate flag? They're flying from the car, trolling that neighborhood. Yeah, I don't give an S.
They aren't similar.
No.
At all.
Not even slightly. I mean, the Norwegian flag, I think it's the Norwegian flag, or is it a Danish flag? One of the Scandinavian flags often gets confused for the Confederate flag because Americans don't know anything about the rest of the world.
Even then, it's tough.
I mean, I'm kind of sympathetic, but like it's a pretty ridiculous statement because even if it was a Confederate flag, let's be honest, dragging them from their car and executing them in the street, not justified.
No,
at all. But the fact that he was like, yeah, they got shot, did they? They're white. I don't care because they're Confederates. Seems to be a bit awful, to be honest.
I mean, these people will put you up against the wall.
They literally did, yeah. So there was a GoFundMe for Arzuga's funeral costs and medical care for Perez, which had raised more than $20,000. I imagine it's probably raised more by now because we're covering this a few days afterwards. But it's not gotten any better. But Lori Lightfoot, excuse me, I don't know what's going on in my throat. Lori Lightfoot, the mayor of Chicago, stated the police would do everything in their power to make sure these people who created such brazen chaos and harm are held in custody till they say they're in court. I don't believe they are typical by any stretch of the young black men in our city, but it's horrific nonetheless. That's right. I can't believe there was a shooting in Chicago, you know.
Young black
so
men
out
involved.
of character. Yeah, I mean, you're a racist. It's pretty awful. And I tell you what, Chicago, like, this is daily. There are literally a dozen shootings every day.
They have the record for the largest number of people killed in a weekend as well.
Bloody hell.
I think it was like 46 people, something like that.
Well, if I'm not dying myself, it turns out that Yasmin Perez actually died of her wounds on Tuesday afternoon, so a few days later, and the couple leave 2 children behind. So this gang has just orphaned 2 children. 24 and 25 years old, just killed in the street in Lori Lightfoot's Chicago. So it's a good thing she's obsessed with racism, isn't it? She decided that racism was a public health crisis in Chicago.
To who? Great
question.
The Puerto Ricans?
the blacks is what she would argue. She found that life expectancy for black Chicagoans was on average 9 years shorter than for other racial groups.
Okay.
I wonder if it's all of the lead poisoning.
I wonder if it's the crime.
Well, that was the joke.
Oh.
In a declaration published on Thursday, Laurie called on all Chicagoans to work together to address the stark racial inequalities that resulted from the centuries of systemic racism in Chicago and the nation. Yeah, maybe it's something to do with behavior of certain communities in Chicago.
Like, the life expectancy of a modern Chicagoan is not determined by what happened centuries ago.
No.
There are much more pressing things that determine your life expectancy there.
Yeah, like gang warfare. Like constant shootouts. All of these things doubtless have a massive impact on life expectancy when, like, the average black man in Chicago dies at 22 or something like that. Like, I imagine that, look, that really impacts on the bloody the graphs she's looking at.
Did you know 2 centuries ago there was a murderer in this village?
Yeah,
there's one now.
Exactly. But this is the point, though. Like, it's the behavior of the people that you have to address. You can't just be like, oh, they're not getting sufficient medical care or something. So that's not the problem. You know, the problem is the things that they do, and it's not about racism. In fact, if you're going to point to racism being an operant factor in any of this, it's that these things are ignored because of the racism of the people in charge. As in the paternal racism, it's like, oh, the black people can't be expected to hold up to the standards of the rest of the people.
She's the best example of this.
She's a fantastic
with her policy of interviews, in which she decided she would give interviews only to black and brown people, I think her words were. So some, like, Mexican guy called her up. I think he might have been, like, half Mexican as well. And he was like, hey, can I have an interview? You know, testing the waters.
Yeah.
And she said yes. And he was like, right, so get rid of your policy of not interviewing whites and we'll do it. And she said no. So he was like, well, interview's cancelled then. Shut off. Put it on the phone.
She's married to a white woman.
Yeah. So those interviews are also cancelled, I guess.
Oh, God, I don't even want to think, especially... Anyway, so... She her anti-racist plan includes building capacity for anti-racist leadership, reckoning with the impacts of racism, advancing strategies to operationalize racial equality, empowering... Again, none of this is to do with black gangs shooting each other.
But just like she's cutting off white people from interviews, and she's like, "We must reckon with racism. My wife is going to berate me." Yeah, the white wife's like, "What the heck?"
Advancing strategies to operationalize racial equality, empowering transformative community relationships. Doesn't sound like any of that's going to come to any particular use, does it?
I don't even know what that means, that last one.
No, exactly. It's all mealy-mouthed corporate speak that's designed to pretend that they're doing something while obviously avoiding the fact that it is the behavior of the gangs in Chicago that is the problem in the black community. And there's just no getting around it. While they do the things that they do, none of this is going to change anything. And... like, this is, it seems it's very localized in Chicago as well. It's even localized. I went to Chicago, and apparently it's very localized in certain neighborhoods, so you can just avoid those neighborhoods. It's not a problem. And of course, we do not think this is a reflection on anyone outside of the people in Chicago who are actually doing the shooting.
No, it's not a purpose of genetics. It's a purpose of environment and behavior.
Yeah, it's a purpose of ethics, and it's that these people have been allowed to get away with this. Like, if this was happening in an English city, I'd be like, God, you send in whatever forces, the military, to pacify the area and take all of their weaponry. Like, you don't ever let them shoot each other. I'm sorry. Oh, but my Second Amendment, okay.
In Britain, it'd be them stabbing each other.
Well, yeah, okay. You go in, pacify them with whatever military force is required, and take their knives. Then sit them down. Then take them to boot camps or something. I don't know. Do something. You can't just let them kill each other.
In the purposes of the United States, the Second Amendment still applies. So what I would say is just you don't even need to necessarily take away their guns. Just have the.
I bet all of these guns are illegal. Okay. I bet they're not registered firearms.
The illegal ones, sure. But on the legal side, if there's still the problem after illegal guns being around, well, then you could just have the army patrol the streets. I mean, we have it in Paris, we have it in Belgium and whatnot.
Strasbourg, yeah.
Because of our own local problems. So I don't know why Chicago can't have that privilege.
Well, I mean, it's either that or just lots and lots of deaths.
I'd rather have the soldiers.
Yeah, same here. But go in there and take any illegal weaponry they've got, obviously. And I assume that the legal gun owners are the sort of people who actually aren't running around in gangs shooting each other. Call me crazy, but I've got this hunch.
They're probably defending themselves from the goddamn gangs.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. So yeah, and it turns out that she had also pledged nearly $10 million in COVID-19 relief funding from the CDC to establish healthy Chicago equity zones. So this money is going to be going into racial justice programs.
It's going to go in someone's back pocket.
Yes, because I imagine Chicago is a deeply corrupt place as well. There we go.
It doesn't even necessarily have to be corrupt, as in, like, here's the money. You can do what Abraham X. Kendi did and just charge, what was it, 25 grand for a Zoom call?
Yeah.
That's that money gone. Do that a bunch of times, you'll get rid of the 10 million, don't worry.
Yeah, it's a legal form of laundering, basically. Same with Hunter Biden and he's going to be selling his artwork for like 20 to 50 grand or 500 grand or something like that. It's like, look, this is obviously a slush. You know, it's so obvious that you're just going to rinse this money through. Oh, look, I've got a little clay model that Hunter Biden made me. Why? How much was it? $500,000. Oh, come on.
Start selling your hairs for $1 million each.
God. Hunter Biden gets on OnlyFans. I mean, have you seen the stuff on his laptop? That's practically it. If you enjoyed this segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can watch the full broadcast live every weekday at 1 p.m. UK time on lotuseaters.com.